Hello. In this class, we are going to discuss about the selection of fabric and trims for garment dyeing, and also we will see certain videos how we can achieve different fancy effects like tie and dye, dip dye and batik printing in terms of the garment dyeing. So the selection of fabric and trims for garment dyeing. Whereas in the conventional method of fabric dyeing, we need not to see much conditions of the fabric and all. But in case of garment dyeing, it is very much relevant and we need to take proper care such that the effect which obtained by the garment dyeing will remain and it will be fast enough in order to produce. The selection of fabric, primarily we should see that whatever the batches of garments we are producing, it all should be having identical in terms of the shade, such that the grey fabric must be selected in the same shade. Okay. One is bleached and one is unbleached. So what happens is the outcome may not be exactly same. Okay. Then the loom state fabric must be converted into RFD. RFD is nothing but ready for dyeing fabric. Okay. There are generally three types of fabrics when it comes to garment dyeing. One is grey fabric, another one is RFD, ready for dyeing, and another one is ready for garment dyeing. Ready for garment dyeing. Okay. So out of this, based on the usage and all, what happens is we will be having different qualities of the fabric. One is desized, covered only in case of the darker colors. Desizing and scouring both will happen in case of the darker colors. And desizing, scouring and also bleaching will happen in case of the light colors. Why? Because in order to obtain very light or minute shade, it will be difficult to get exact shade if it is not bleached. Once it is bleached, so the fabric will be white in background, such that what happens, the required shade can be obtained easily in terms of the garment dyeing. And to get the best looking garment, means in order to have good sheen and all, it is recommended that the fabric should be gone with desizing, scouring and bleaching, and this is the normal in terms of the normal requirement. Along with this, if it is done with mercerizing also, it will be quite comfortable. So, as for heavy swelling of fibers such as cotton, the elasticized areas like waistbands, cuffs, and it must be fairly slack, means loose, such that what happens is sometimes the shrinkage will happen and it will become tight after the garment dyeing. So that before the processing itself, so those places and it should be loose fabric. Okay. Otherwise, what happens near the waistband or near the collar and cuff, what happens is the fabric layers which are there in this seam, okay, as like either it is a lapped seam or whether it is a superimposed seam, what will happen? So two layers are kept together and on top of it one more binding layer would be there. Okay. So this layers together, what will happen? Certain more number of layers will not let the dye to penetrate inside the layers. Understanding? I hope you are understanding. So, in terms of the waistband and all, if it is made from very high cover factor fabrics and all, it may not be gone easily. Okay, so that is one thing. And apart from that, the shrinkage behavior of the fabric also must be uniform before the garment dyeing. And the articles which are prone to create crease marks and peeling effects should be turned inside out, so that the inside will be processed. So the surface, the face side of the fabric will remain good, okay, and whatever the abrasion or the this thing is going to happen, that will be there on the inside of the garment, okay, so that the appearance will not get tampered. That is the basic objective of inside out, okay. Even you might have observed certain garments also while washing at home also it will be washed inside out, okay. Specifically, like, or even during the ironing also, the printed t-shirts will be ironed from inside out position. And then all these fabrics should be free from foreign materials like contamination, dust, dirt, and various other things. And main important thing, like the interlinings which are used in order to do this, so the fabric and this thing both should be having the similar kind of thing. So the dyes to be taken as same as the outer fabric. Okay. Then the gum means the interlining particle dye. Okay. Like generally the interlinings generally available either white, clear, and sometimes black or charcoal black. Okay. So we need to select the interlining color as per it, so that it will not create a very unpleasant look once the garment dyeing is over. And the resin or the gum which is going to be used should not be removed off from the surface. So there are a few mistakes or a few problems. Those are referred as strike through or strike back should not happen during the fusing. Excessive gum or loosened gum. Okay. In case of polyester and polyethylene is also fine. High density polyethylene resin. These kind of interlinings can be very easily used. And the resin of the interlining should not make adverse effect, as like what we were discussing, the strike through and strike back should not happen. Then, see, in terms of the selection of accessories like buttons, studs, zippers, okay, the metallic components, these must be free from nickel, okay, and the polyester buttons should be with predetermined colors. Okay, so whatever the blue color shirt, if you are dyeing white to blue, then the colored buttons also should be used. Say if you are producing 1,000 garments, 200 is blue, 200 is red, and 600 is yellow. Okay, so these specific 200 garments should be attached with either the blue color buttons itself, and 200 of red color buttons itself, and 600 of yellow color button itself. So that once the dyeing is over, it will be a dye to match. Okay. We need to take care of this concept. Okay. Then, if you consider the type of buttons which are there, the nylon buttons are much preferred in this case. Okay. Then, sometimes even wooden buttons which will be used, it need to be properly verified whether it is going to be okay or not. Okay. Then, the brass, antique brass, silver, gunmetal, and sometimes even the golden zipper, very expensive zippers like golden coated zippers. These can be used, but we need to check it at a trial run basis. Say 2 to 10 garments in the initial stage, it need to be processed once, and then it need to be confirmed and verified whether the final look is okay or not. Okay. Then along with this, the studs, buttons, the studs and buttons. Okay, the other like in case of denims and all, these also should be dyed of the garment, but basically we need to see that the breakage should be avoided. Okay, but the best recommendation is that don't attach buttons in case of garment dyeing before the dyeing process. Let it complete the dyeing, then you take it, then you remove it, iron it, and then you attach the buttons. Okay, so that would be one of the best situation we can do. Otherwise, what will happen? Suppose the first button to the second button, if say the distance is 85 mm. Okay, so maybe after the dyeing process, it might be what you call shrink. Okay, 85 may become 80. Okay, but whereas the buttonhole placket and button placket both may not be consisting of the same seam. Okay, so it may be consisting only 2 layers of fabrics and the other one may be consisting of 4 layers of fabrics. The shrinkage may be slightly different. So what happens? the distance between the buttonhole to buttonhole and button to button may vary after the dyeing. Okay, so in that case what people will do, obviously they need to redo the process. Okay, so in order to avoid that, it is better we attach the buttons like studs, rivets, all these things once the dyeing process is over. Then in case of care labels must be used in such a way that it is having very good in terms of the fastness properties. It should not attract okay, and it should not attract any type of dye from the during the dyeing process. Okay, otherwise the appearance of the care label will become. What is the color of care label generally which is there? It is mainly white in color. Okay, and the polyester care labels are mostly used. Why? Because the polyester dyeing temperature is somewhere around 170 degrees centigrade, and whereas for cotton and all it is much lesser than that. Maybe at cold reactive dyes and all it can be done even at 60 degrees centigrade also. Okay. In case of normal, it may be 100 or 120 degrees it can reach, but the polyester dyeing temperature is like 170 degrees centigrade, and in generally we will not reach to 170 degrees centigrade. Okay, so that's why the polyester care labels are much used, are preferred. Then sometimes near the waistband and near the side seam and all, there may be a bunch of labels. In order to protect them, maybe a pouch can be kept as like a zipper pouch, can be inserted along with these care labels, and then it can be gone with the processing of the garment dye. And embroidery threads should be used, must be of polyester so that it will not absorb the dye. Okay, so we should not use the cotton threads and all in case of the embroidery. And only the pre-confirmed colors, means whatever the colors which will be required in the final stage, only they can be done before that. Or if it is possible, the garment embroidery is preferred comparatively. Okay. So we need to take additional care in terms of the when we are using the metallic buttons. Okay. And any of the metal components, they should be free from nickel, and it should be rust free. Generally nylon buttons are preferred, or polyester also in case of predetermined colors. But we cannot dye the buttons along with the normal garment. Okay. Then the care labels should be used by the polyester, and embroideries can be done only with polyester threads, but if possible we can postpone all these processes to the later stage of after the dyeing. We can complete this one. Then the selection of sewing thread. Cotton thread is preferred in most of the garment dyeing. They should be of the same lot. Okay, since the cotton garment and cotton sewing thread, it may be observed. Okay. But polyester threads can be used only in a predetermined colors. But if we know that we need to manufacture blue, red and yellow in the sequence itself, then what happens is we can create the polyester shirts with the exact quantities, like 200 shirts of blue. So these 200 shirts of the blue can be dyed with, or this blue color sewing thread can be used for manufacturing of the first 200 shirts. And then only those shirts should be dyed with the blue color. Okay. And nylon threads also can be used, but proper care should be taken in terms of maintaining the consistency. Okay. Then sewing threads to be of the high strength to withstand the required seam strength, and mostly heavy threads than the normal polyester threads. Say if normally we are supposed to use 80 stickage number, but in the garments where we are using the sewing threads, it should be a little higher. Maybe instead of 80, we may use 60. Okay. Then the threads we should use at a low tension, such that what happens if case any shrinkage which is there also, it will tighten later, and then the sufficient tension will be created. Otherwise, it would create lot of unnecessary puckering in terms of the garment dyeing. So this point is very important that you should understand, that in order to avoid the puckering during the sewing thread, the tension should be less. during the sewing thread, the tension should be less. Or we need to select some of the sewing threads which are having very low shrinkage or shrink proof. Okay. Then, depending upon the requirement, the thread numbers can be used. Means instead of one, maybe a double threads also will be used. Or instead of a 2-ply, maybe a 3-ply thread can be used. And we need to take a special care, especially when we are using the coarse spun yarns as the sewing threads. So, in terms of the sewing parameters, few conditions we need to take into the consideration. One is the stitch density. That is also referred as stitch per inch or stitches per centimeter. Stitch per inch or stitch per centimeter. Okay. So, in case of a normal sewing, the SPI, the bigger the SPI, the better it is. But in case of garment dyeing, it is advised to go with a little less SPI. Say, generally, if the manufacturer will go with 12 SPI, it is advised to reduce it to SPI, such that bigger pockets of seams would be there, such that the shrinkage is comparatively less, and whatever the sewing thread shrinkage is going to show least effect when the SPI is low. When the SPI is very higher, so obviously it will definitely go for puckering effect. Then, this is the first point. The second point is the thread tension. Thread tension should be comparatively lower. Thread tension should be comparatively lower. Again, during the dyeing process, the shrinkage might happen. So, in order to avoid the puckering of the seams, we need to maintain little less thread tension, such that it will be okay even after the dyeing. The seams are very much controllable, and it will be good looking. Then, the selection of stitch type and seam type. Generally, it is advised to avoid chain stitches. It is generally advised to avoid chain stitches and to go with lock stitches. Why? Because the seam security will be better. And during the abrasion of the garment dyeing, if any of the one of the stitch broken also, in case of lock stitch, it will not get propagated. It will not make it into a bigger hole. So that is the reason we are recommending the lock stitches, and chain stitches should be avoided as much as possible. Then the needle size. The needle size should be slightly reduced, such that a finer needle will be created, so that it will not unnecessarily create or it will not unnecessarily punch some of the warp, weft or any of the knitted loops. Okay. In case of knitting, what happens? A single thread breakage will be propagated into a big hole. A single thread breakage will be propagated into a big hole in case of knitted garments. So that is the reason, generally if we go with a one number less needle, a finer needle, so it can be avoided. Okay. So one is what? The stitch density, SPI should be slightly reduced compared with the normal one. Thread tension should be reduced. Stitches and seam types. Stitches should be lock stitches should be selected, and seam types means bound seams or lapped seams are much preferred than a simple superimposed seams. Okay, and then a needle size should be slightly finer or lesser in terms of the number. Okay, so these are the various parameters we need to consider in case of in terms of the fabric and various trims and accessories which are going to be used, and the stitching process parameters. Okay, I hope you are enjoying so far. And now the next part of the class, we are going to discuss some of the fancy effects which are there. Okay, so we are going to discuss about dip dye, tie and dye and batik printing. This is very interesting and very fascinating subject. So I hope you all guys are enjoying this, learning this subject. Okay. So in this video, what is happening? The lady, first of all, she is wetting the garment in such a way that whatever the air gaps which will be there, so it will be gone, and this water will be removed by means of putting into a hydro extractor. Hydro extractor is the one, it will create a centrifugal force such that the additional moisture will be removed. And then what happens, as per our pattern requirement, however we wanted the design, accordingly these garments are tied. Okay, these garments are tied in that shape so that the moisture, slight moisture which is there, so when it is inserted into the dye bath or something like that, so what happens already which is there in the moisture, so it is easily transferable. The dye particles will be easily transferable to all the parts of the garments. So understood the importance of wetting the garment before the actual dye. Okay, specifically for tie and dye. Specifically for tie and dye. Okay, all you guys will have an experiment and you will perform this tie and dye on your own. Okay, once you are in college and once in the laboratory session. So you can see the garments which are tie and dye. So now the first one is for the spiral design. Say if I wanted to create the garment with a spiral design. Okay, so what should we do? You see, we need to lay the fabric open and then hold it in the middle, rotate it. Then you need to put either the rubber bands or any of the stuff which will be available, either sometimes even the cotton thread also. It should be tightly stick and it will be tied with various number of either rubber bands or a thick cotton thread. Okay. Once it is done, then we can make it into either 3 or 4 segments and each segment should be of different color. So you can see here red, blue and light blue which is done. So once you open this, once the dyeing is over, you can see such a beautiful spiral design which is created. Another one is stripe design. If you want to create a stripes design in terms of this garment dyeing, so you see the folding, the garment should be folded straightly. Then we will create certain pockets in terms of the garments, and then wherever we do not want, we will be keep with another wrap of white fabric or any other thing. So you can see such a beautiful striped shirt. You can create all these things in our laboratory session. If you want to create a cloudy design, okay, so this cloudy design is possible in order to, like you see, where we need to take 1 to 2 inches grasps of each fabric and then we need to tie it. Again, it should be dipped with the single solution or sometimes maybe part solutions like 50% and 50%. Okay, pouring of the dye stuff onto this fabric. You can see such a beautiful design. The clouds which are being created all around the garment. Okay, this is one of the very fascinating subject. Okay, and there is a lot of market with respect to this tie and dye shirts. But many of them, in order to, these are the unique designs. Okay, so what happens? Obviously, the cost of manufacturing will go slightly higher than a regular shirts. Okay, so very high fashion designers and all will go with these tie and dye techniques. Okay, so this cloudy shirt is very good. Then the basic tie and dye process. So based upon the design and all, either we want a spiral or similarly there are more number of designs, okay, which we can create. Okay, and we can be more innovative also in terms of the creating the pattern and all. Okay, so in the ground the sand and all which will be kept so that much of the dye particle will not penetrate anywhere else. Okay, yeah, so various colors and all. So this topic is tie and dye. Next topic is dip dye. What is dip dye? we take the garment, we dip only part of the garment such that only part of the garment will get dyed and the remaining will not be getting the dye. Either the white or the base color only will be there.
In order to achieve a dip dye look on a garment, dye stuff needs to be poured into a flat tray, so the bottom is
You see, this
centimeters.
is the
As the name of the technique suggests, the garment then gets dipped into
only part of the garment is being
advisable to
penetrated into the
one
dye part.
garment and
Okay, so it is not a single person. Sometimes even a machine also can be used. I will show that machine also, the dip dyeing machine. So manually only one person will be keep on holding, other person will squeeze it in such a way that since we are not wetting this garment, otherwise it will propagate into the higher positions also in terms of the vertical wicking ability and that. So we need to squeeze it manually such that the dye will be taking place. Then it can be open, let it open for the line drying. Okay. Once the drying is over, you can see such a beautiful jacket is being created. So this jacket is having, the bottom part is having with this red color and the top part is remained with the white color. Okay. Isn't it good? Yes. Next one is batik print. So in this one, what happens? We use a wax such that in those areas the dye uptake will not take place. Generally, we use a combination of a paraffin wax and a bee wax. Bee wax does not cracks. Okay, that is the reason the bee wax is. And you can see the bee wax or the paraffin wax which is available. It can be melted, and we will use either the artisan pen or some type of block to print the wax on top of the fabric, as like this one. So once the wax is impregnated with the kind of batik blocks, okay, so only in that areas the wax will be there. It will not, so during the application of the dye part, wherever the wax is there, it will not absorb the moisture. So obviously when it will resist the dye particles to enter into that region. So only in that area what happens, the dye will not get penetrated. Okay, so once the dyeing is done, as like this one, so what happens here? We can create this one. So similarly, a pigment print also will be there. Pigment is something which is like, which does not have direct affinity to textile substrate. So we need to use the binders. So in this, the machine, we can see, in this machine, it is a rotary drum machine. Okay. Probably in the next class, we will discuss about various different kinds of dyeing machine. So this is a rotary drum machine. So the drum may be consist of several segments or something, and in the bottom, the dye bath will be consisting the dye particles and various fixers and other chemicals together. So what happens? It will be keep on rotating for some time, so that during that rotation, the dye will come in connection with this textile materials and the dyeing will take place. So this machine is rotating, right? So what happens? The drum is open and these garments which are already there, which can be, so once it is done, so the loading of chemicals and all can be done, either a bleaching agent or even what you call the dyeing chemicals, and sometimes waterproofing agents or softener wash. All these things can be kept in terms of the simultaneous mode. Okay. So you can see such a beautiful finish has been obtained for this shirt in terms of the garment dyeing. Similarly, where the pigment dyeing we have seen, sometimes instead of dyeing, we can use pigment spray also. You can observe some of them in a few of the t-shirts or sometimes in terms of the denims. Can you see now the t-shirt is being sprayed with respect to the pigment, but the operator need to take additional precautions with respect to masks and various other things. Can you see such a beautiful designs are being created with respect to the pigment spraying? Okay, so wherever the print is there, it will remain as it is, and the remaining thing will get all this pigment printing. So the air permeability also will not be much hampered. Why? Because only part of the surface only is going to be created. But this is such a handmade techniques such that what happens, creativity is required and additional highly skilled labor are required. So that these are much expensive in terms of the garments are much expensive. Sometimes even the cold pigment and all, which will be there, much temperature is not required. We need to keep them in terms of the dipping into this one. You see, since it is not wetted in the precondition, so the garments need to be thoroughly impregnated with them, and then the excess moisture or the dye particles, the bath chemicals need to be removed. Okay, so you can see how the operator is handling the material. Okay, so it will create as like what you call a fiber dye effect. Okay, once it is done, it will be means whatever the dispersed chemicals and all will be removed by means of a hot water wash, and then it will be inserted into a centrifuge in order to remove any of the additional moisture which is there can be created, so that a softener finish. Now you can see the rib is having such a beautiful finish. Okay, similarly another process, certain fancy effects and all which we are seeing, like this lava dye, as like lava and all, how it will be, it is like a dispersed effect. Okay, as like in the earlier just before we have seen a cloudy web kind of design, right? Similar kind of design can be created with respect to this one. So during this time, the temperature and chemical loading, all these three important things we need to consider as a technocrat. How much time we are keeping, how much temperature we are keeping. Yes, I hope you enjoyed all these different fancy effects like tie and dye, dip, batik and all. Okay, it is not only that you need to see, you also need to make these effects in reality in terms of the lab sessions. Okay, so I hope you have enjoyed this session and you have learned many new things in this class. So thank you for patient listening. Have a good day. Stay safe. Stay healthy. Thank you.